So then, what the next chapter? I'm jumping now. We're jumping to chapter 15. Okay. And the reason I want to jump to chapter 15, chapter 15 takes it and starts talking about rigid bodies. We've done everything we've done so far. We've done particles. Okay. And we can use all the particles to represent all sorts of things, right? We've used particles to represent satellites, represent horses, cars, buses, trains, all sorts of things. Okay? But the one thing that these particles can't do is they can't rotate. They can go along a curved path, they can go a straight path, okay? They can speed up, they can slow down, but we haven't done any sort of rotation. And so in chapter 15, we get to kinematics of rigid bodies. And just like we did in statics, now that we got rigid bodies, not only can they translate, but they can rotate, they can spin. And we need to take that into account. So that's what we'll be doing that's different in chapter 15. Not only will they be translating, but they'll be rotating as well. So there's the beginning of chapter 15, there's some basic types of motion that it breaks down. And so we'll look at those for a minute, and then start concentrating on the ones that we're going to be dealing with. Clean this board a little bit. So, rigid bodies, they're just really a collection of particles. The only difference is now those particles can't move relative to each other. Okay, because it's a rigid body, so all the particles are in place. They can't move relative to each other. So we're going to break down into 5 categories of motion. And the first one is translation. So translation, like our rigid body here, okay, whatever orientation our rigid body has initially, as it moves, whether it goes around in a circle, around a corner, straight line, the orientation of our rigid body stays the same. So if we have a straight line, say from top to bottom like this, okay, as this thing moves, that straight line stays in the same orientation. So in translation, any straight line you draw remains the same. Okay, same orientation, same angle, same distance between those 2 points on a straight line. Okay. So that's essentially what we've been doing. Okay, we haven't been when we've been doing particle motion. A particle can't rotate, so we didn't have to take that into account. But in translation, our rigid body acts like a particle. It doesn't rotate. So, since we already spent 5 weeks talking about, motion of particles, we already know this one here. So we're not going to do any more with it. Okay, number 2 is rotation about a fixed axis. This is the idea of a pulley. For instance, there's lots of things it could be. Okay? Well, let me have a pulley. It's fixed, okay? And it's just rotating. And so that's what we're going to look at. okay? That axis itself is not moving, so it's not like a wheel, okay? A wheel is also rotates about an axis, but it rolls down the road, or rolls along the floor, so it moves, okay? Here is a fixed axis, and so we'll talk about that. Right. Number 3 is what we call general plane motion. And by plane motion, we mean that the motion all stays in one plane. In the plane of the board, or the plane of the floor, or the plane of your paper. Okay. So the plane here doesn't mean airplane or anything like that. It's a plane. Okay. And this is a combination of translation and rotation. Okay. This is the wheel that rolls down the road. Okay. That we've got a wheel here, and starts rotating, it's gonna, okay, the axis, the center of the wheel is also going to move, okay? And this actually gets quite a bit complicated. So we're gonna spend a significant amount of time on this, okay? Because not only do we have rotation, but we have translation as well. Okay, so it's kind of a combination of these two, but we're not coming out in the third dimension, okay? The fourth one is motion about a fixed point. And the best way to visualize this is if you have one of those tops kids have that you spin and it spins and stays really upright, okay? After it winds down a little bit, then it starts wobbling from side to side. The point still stays in the same place, it's still spinning, but it's not spinning straight up and down, it's wobbling, okay? And so that's what's going on here, that the motion about a fixed point. The point of the top stays in the same place, but it's not only going round, but it's wobbling from side to side as well. And if you start thinking about that, that's really getting complicated, because now we've got the third dimension as well. Okay. We're not going to go here. Okay. Later on, if you keep looking, working in mechanics and stuff like that, yeah, okay, you can go there, but we can't in another 5 weeks. And other things we need to do, go to that. Okay. And then there's a fifth category, which is just general motion. Which is anything that doesn't fit into the first 4 categories. And since we're not going to 4, we're not going to 5. Yes. So we'll spend a little bit of time. We already talked 1 essentially. That's what we've been doing with particles. Okay. So we'll spend a little bit of time on rotation about a fixed axis. That's kind of useful. But then we'll spend the bulk of our time in this chapter 15 talking about general plane motion. This starts to get a little interesting. If bowling balls, for instance, anyone bowl? Someone bowl? Last year I had a guy that bowled quite a bit. If you bowl, I mean, I'm sure all of you have bowled at one time, maybe. Okay? And if you watch the other lane when good people are bowling, okay, you'll notice when they throw the ball, it doesn't start rolling right away. Okay? It depends how well oiled the lanes are, the actually oiled lanes. The ball will actually skid until friction overtakes it, and then it's going to start to roll. Okay. And that's where they put spin on it. If you ever watch really good bowlers, the ball doesn't go straight, it goes straight for a while and then it hooks, or it goes the other way. Okay. That's friction kicking in. And so rolling and then rolling without slipping, okay, is different. So there's really quite a lot of interesting stuff that goes on in this one here.